Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today we are going to talk about Star Trek Picard, Episode 7. The title of this one is Nepenthe. It is a really good episode. It's really the one I was waiting for, just to see what was happening with some of our other favorites. And as I was binge watching this, I was trying to just go ahead and go to bed, but I was alas unable to as soon as I found out who was in this episode. I had questions that I needed answered, you guys. I needed to know if Riker and Troy are still together now, because that's what I wanted. Y'all know I'm a shipper, and I will not apologize for it. But we get to find out in this episode. Of course, we also have some other important things happening. In the previous episode, it ended with Picard escaping the artifact with Soji, who has now been activated, but still has no idea who or what she truly is. And now Elnor is stuck on the Borg artifact with Hugh, and the other ship with Captain Rios and the rest of the fam, the La Sirena, is supposed to rendezvous with Picard and Soji on Nepenthe, the planet we initially find ourselves as we are starting this episode. So, that is where everything is, more or less, at this point. So, upon arrival on Nepenthe, Soji is now with this complete stranger that she met just a little bit ago on the artifact after having been activated following her boyfriend trying to kill her. So she is having some trust issues, you guys. Quite a lot of trust issues at this point. And honestly, who's to blame her? A lot has gone sideways. Everything that she has tested of her belongings has said that they're about 3 years old, so she's not even sure what precisely she may be. And she's walking along in the woods on Nepenthe with Picard, having this conversation, and they're clearly walking towards something. They know where they're going, or at least Picard does, but they're wandering through the woods and talking about what's going on just a little bit when they are suddenly accosted by a young girl who has a bow and arrow. And she's pointing the bow and arrow at Picard's heart, and he tells her that she should point it at his head instead because of the heart surgery that was performed on him by Dr. Crusher way back when in TNG. So he tells her that she should instead point the arrow at his head because he has an artificial heart and she would have a better shot at shooting at his head. And Soji looks very confused as to why this man would be telling this girl who is pointing a weapon at them how to actually kill him. And he assures her, that's not going to happen. Is it Kestra? And so Picard clearly knows this child that is running around in the woods. And Kestra looks like she's probably about 12 or 13. I don't recall if they actually say how old she is in the show, but she's probably somewhere between like 11 and 13 if I had to give her an age range. Kestra leads them through the woods back towards her house. And as they're walking along, Kestra essentially asks if Soji is an android, or states that she's an android. And this is quite jarring for Soji, but Kestra just has that innocence and inquisitiveness about her that children do, and also that bluntness. So Kestra's not trying to hurt her feelings. She's just not really considering them at all, like how someone would perhaps handle finding out that kind of thing. Because also, Kestra doesn't know that Soji has just found out that she might not be who she thought she was. So they go ahead and show up at the house, and we get to see Deanna, who is Kestra's mom and is chilling in the front yard, more or less. And remember, Deanna Troi is an empath because she is half Betazoid. So she can feel the emotions of others around her and stuff. So as soon as she sees Picard, she's very happy to see him. But she's like, oh no, what's wrong? Because Deanna can feel it. And Picard essentially is telling her that there's something gone sideways, and he wants to talk to her and Will about it. And that is when Kestra starts yelling for her dad. And we see Riker in the kitchen where he's like cooking or doing dishes or something very domestic. And in true Riker fashion, even as a dad, he is still the same old Riker. And so Kestra's like, Dad, come out here. And he's like, what? Yelling from inside the house. And she keeps yelling for him. And he's like, stop yelling. It's a very cute domestic scene to establish the relationship between all of these characters and reintroduce them to us. And then Kestra yells back, it's Jean-Luc Picard. And Riker's like, what? And he goes to open the door to go outside. Picard's standing on the other side of the door. It's just a really great reunion scene. And I was so happy to find that Riker and Troi are together and that they are living on this very cute little planet out in the middle of the woods, raising a daughter who has every bit as much fire as the two of them have. So they have a brick oven pizza, or like an outdoor pizza oven and everything. And it appears that Riker likes to cook a lot now that he is home and he's playing a Papa Bear. They are making things themselves with their food rather than using replicators. But it's not that they have anything against technology. As we see in the first 5 or 10 minutes, as Picard is briefly giving the overview, highly glossing over the facts to Riker. Riker is like, yeah, something's wrong, raise shields, and his house like raises shields around the property and stuff. And then he finds out from Picard that Romulans are involved, and so Riker's pretty much just gives him a look that says, say no more, fam, and tells the house to go ahead and enable the anti-cloaking measures as well, so they'll be able to know if/when the Romulans decide to show up. I thought it was really cool to see that kind of tech for the house, and you can see in a way that Riker is still carrying a lot of his Starfleet past with him in that way. Of course, Riker would have a house that he's able to give these commands to and everything, and to raise the shields and all that jazz. And it was really nice also, to hear Riker call for raising the shields. I loved it. It was a really neat and very different way to do it that also further gives us a sense of familiarity while establishing that this is indeed a totally different series than Star Trek The Next Generation was. So I thought it was very cool to see and to watch them be reunited. And it's very clear that Picard has distanced himself from everyone that he cares about over the past 14 years, to be honest. So he hasn't spent a lot of time with them, but you can see that there's still very honest affection there, and I absolutely loved it. All right, we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what's going on Nepenthe.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about what happened in the last episode, episode 6, and where we find ourselves with Soji and Picard on Nepenthe, visiting the Riker Troys. Troy Rikers? I'm not sure. But we are visiting Riker and Troy, who are married now and have a daughter named Kestra. Now, it's very interesting that they have named this planet Nepenthe. And truly, there's almost nothing in Star Trek that is named or discussed that has not been given much thought. Just like pretty much everything else in here with the references to Tragic Sense of Life and Don Quixote and everything else and the bits of humanity. But Nepenthe also is a reference, and it comes from Homer's The Odyssey. And he refers to it as a drug that uses forgetfulness to destroy sorrow. And so we see that in this episode, that this really beautiful, almost utopic place that Riker and Troy and Kestra are living in is very much due to a very tragic event in their lives. And something they don't necessarily want to forget, but they do want to kind of distance themselves from the sorrow in a way. So as Kestra is showing Soji where to shower and where she can lay down and take a nap and everything, Deanna is talking to Picard in the other room, and this room is someone named Thad's old room. And you find out that Thad was Will and Deanna's son, and he had a very rare disease. He was older than Kestra, and the rare disease that he had would have been easily cured by positronic medical therapy. But since he was diagnosed with it after that Mars disaster 14 years ago and the synth ban, they weren't able to do any more positronic research and medical therapy. It was all banned, which is very similar in many ways to how many people could be saved by certain types of research, like stem cell research, that have been subject to bans over the years due to other circumstances. So in this case, Thad had something that was totally treatable, even though it was rare to have that disease because of that ban. And so this is really showing us how damaging that ban has been and how far-reaching it has been socioculturally as well and sociopolitically. It's not just a political issue with the Federation and the Romulans, and it's not just, hurt Picard and crushed Rafi's career and consequently her life very largely, because she is now, just drowning her sorrows in alcoholism and stuff. But it's also even caused some types of policies to be enacted that have caused people to die, even when doing the positronic research and the medical therapy would not have made Thad a synth at all, but it was a total and complete ban. It just shows the pervasiveness of the issues related to the synth ban and how it's affected all of our favorite characters in many different ways. It's affected Agnes's livelihood and her research, and we will see at a certain point how it has affected Rios as well. But for Thad, you can tell that Deanna is still very heartbroken, even though it's been a long time since Thad has passed. And we never really get to see Thad in this episode, except for a baby picture with Picard holding him, which was super adorable. And you feel Thad in these scenes. You can feel the presence of him essentially in his room. So they're standing there and it's still decorated and stuff with belongings of Thad's, and you get a sense of who he was as a person. And we also see that Thad was very smart, and we can tell from the invented language that Kestra speaks that Thad invented called Vivine. And it is really cute the way that they kind of illustrate that. But also it is a full complex language, which also illustrates just how intelligent Thad was too, and what the galaxy more or less lost in losing this person to something that was totally treatable. And it's kind of that concept of, what would happen if we were not able to cure smallpox and stuff today? Like, who all would we lose in those types of deaths? And that's something that happens with any type of disease. But it's particularly poignant when you see how intelligent he was. He created multiple full languages on his own as a child. Thad did not reach adulthood. And so it's really interesting to see all of his creativity and his imagination and innovation living on in Kestra. We also learn that Thad grew up on a starship. So he wasn't on Beta Z with Deanna's family or with Riker and them back on Earth. They were still working on starships at the time. So he was born on a starship. And because of that, Thad felt that he never had a homeworld of his own. So Vivine is part of Thad's imaginary world called Ardani that he created to kind of have a homeworld of his own and his imagination. And his imaginative properties really helped him thrive in many ways. And I love how much Deanna and Riker really have gone through and encouraged that same type of creativity in Kestra. She is a wild girl of the woods, and that is part of the Vivine culture as well. So it's really heartwarming to see. And as you learn more about Thad through these other characters, your heart just breaks for them. It's a very palpable ache. And at one point, Deanna does tell Picard that even though it was so long ago, Kestra still aches for her brother. But then every day that ache fades a little bit more. And Picard says, seeing that happen must be a different ache for you, because it's hard to watch your child forget your other child, or not forget them so much as just to become less pained, I suppose, by it. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's like, memories fading of somebody that you loved a lot. And Picard says that seeing that happen must be a different ache for Deanna. But remember, Deanna's also an empath. She can literally feel the ache fading from her kid's life. And as a parent, she's going to have some mixed feelings about that, because on the one hand, you don't want your child to be in pain, but on the other, that pain is associated with memories of someone you dearly love, even though they're gone now. So I thought it was really beautiful the way that they play that out, and they understate it a little bit. But you know that for Deanna, this is exceptionally painful, because it's not just losing her child, but she's experiencing her own pain and Riker's and Kestra's. And that has to be a terrible burden to bear. And we see that as Picard goes along and has conversations with the different characters throughout this, that it is really difficult for Deanna in a unique way. And it's changed her in some ways. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how Kestra's conversations with Soji go. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the tragedy that occurred in Riker and Troy's family's life as the synth ban resulted in all positronic research, including medical treatments and applications, to be halted, and resulted in the death of their son when he had something that was totally treatable. And how this is the origins of the planet name Nepenthe, as a reference to Homeric tales. So now we're going to talk about Soji and Kestra. So Kestra has already really taken a shining to Soji and is absolutely fascinated by Soji in every way. She is saying, she's asking her all these questions about being an android and stuff like that. But it's a little bit overwhelming for Soji. Soji totally recognizes that Kestra is a kid and doesn't take a lot of insult from what Kestra is asking her. But at the same time, she's still very overwhelmed. But Kestra shows her where to shower and everything. And their shower is outside on Nepenthe. So Kestra is just chilling outside of the shower area outdoors, talking to Soji, and so Soji is not getting even a minute of peace, more or less, and she's still reckoning with the fact that she is not like everyone else, and that she may in fact be a synthetic life form, and more so that would make her body illegal. It would make her personhood and her very existence completely illegal, and it is a very interesting topic to explore in that way as well. So she's not only concerned about her humanity, but also her status as a legal entity. And if you are just as upset for Soji as I am in that regard, then we can also talk about how that relates to the border issues in the United States regarding the U.S.-Mexico border, and how folks have use certain terminology like illegal immigrant to refer to these undocumented persons who are crossing the border trying to find a better life. And that's really what's going on here. Soji is just another person like everyone else. That's what the measure of man is about. And she is kind-hearted. She's clearly also she's a sweet person. She's very intelligent and she's good. We see that evidenced in her standing there talking to the nameless, even though they're under at the time. And she is just trying to comfort them, especially in their native tongue. She is a kind person, even if she is a synthetic life form. And we already know that it's not just for show with Soji. It's not an act. She's just nice. You see that in her interactions with Kestra as well. And she still has this label of being illegal on her as well, like her existence. If they found out that she existed, they would perform all types of experiments on her and or kill her. So the Romulans have already tried to kill her, but the Federation may well too. She doesn't really have anywhere safe to go, more or less, right now. And she doesn't know these people she's with, even if she does like Kestra. She doesn't know any of these folks. And so Kestra is just, asking her all these questions, pelting her with them. And, she's like, what's it like to be an android? And Soji's like, well, until you said that word back there, I was kind of still hoping that I was human. And you can see that Kestra is sympathetic to that, even if she can't quite understand it as a kid. And she's asking her questions like, do you have tears? Do you have mucus? What do you do when you're tired? What do you do when you're hungry? Oh my gosh, you get hungry. And she's like, that's everything that Data ever wanted. Like, you're able to dream and do all of this other stuff. And Data was a really great dude that worked with my parents and Picard when he was the captain of the starship, and he was the best captain ever. That's what my dad says. And so it's really cute to see how Kestra is envisioning these different activities and like the past experiences of her parents and everything. And we're getting it from a child's perspective, which is really cool. I think it's a really great way to tell this in a different light. But, Soji's kind of been pelted with a lot of questions at this point that's made her mind race, more or less, about what's going on. And so they go outside to talk and everything. And Kestra goes to help Deanna out in the garden. Soji goes with her. They're picking some tomatoes that are fresh from their garden for the food that they're making, for their pizzas. And Kestra has already gone out hunting with her bow and arrow and brought back a bunnicorn to make bunnicorn sausage. So I'm not exactly sure what a bunnicorn is, but it apparently has venom. And so Kestra has already removed the venom sacs from it and everything. So she can field strip these wild animals and everything too, and is totally chill about it. And it makes me wonder if it's a rabbit with a horn, kind of like a jackalope. I have read in some different places that some folks have conceived of unicorns as being venomous, as having a venomous horn and stuff. So I'm kind of wondering if a bunnicorn is like a jackalope in that manner. But they're making this pizza with these fresh tomato slices and bunnicorn sausage. And Deanna's, being typical counselor Troy, trying to be very empathetic towards Soji, even though she can't really feel any of Soji's emotions, which is how Deanna already knew that she was a synthetic life form. So she can see that the girl is clearly distraught and she's experienced trauma. She can tell from her counselor training about that, but as a betazoid, she can't feel it. But she goes ahead and she talks to Soji and is like, I understand if you can't trust us and everything. You've been through a lot. Here, have you ever had a fresh tomato? Have you ever had food that's not replicated? Go ahead and try it. And Soji really enjoys it and stuff. But, she's starting to get a little bit upset about the conversation and realizing she's kind of at the mercy of these complete strangers at this point. And given that what she just went through with Narek trying to kill her has made her feel traumatized and so overly vulnerable, and she probably feels stupid for not seeing it coming. Just a lot of that blame and self-loathing that people who have been victims of different types of abuse tend to carry as their mantle. And so Picard comes over while they're talking about this, and he is kind of rude to her at that point. And so Soji, shoves him in the shoulder as she passes him and knocks him sideways because, again, she's a synth now, and so she has excess strength. And, Riker gets mad at her about it. He's like, hey, and catches Picard and is like, you okay? And he goes, oh, yeah, she pulled her punches in that regard. But my favorite part of this point is that Deanna goes off on him. She's like, look, I never would have said this as Counselor Troy, but as Deanna, you had that coming. You are being so insensitive to what that poor girl has gone through, and she has no reason to trust anyone. I don't blame her for not wanting to trust anyone and for being confused and upset. And you're lucky that she actually did not shove you harder than she did, because you would have had that coming. And she's like, she does not need you to act like that right now. She needs you to be human towards her. Everyone else has taken advantage of her, and so she just needs someone to be like classic Picard. She needs you to be understanding, and more than she really just needs you to be a leader right now. Be the man I know you can be and help this kid out. And it's a tough love moment, and it's so nice to see that interaction between them without ranks or anything between them. Riker and Troy and Picard still have a very similar relationship, but just with more freedom to speak freely. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Picard's conversation with Riker.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about Kestra and Soji's friendship and how it's really difficult for Soji to process all the things that Kestra is hitting her with, because she's reckoning with the fact that she's not human and that as a synthetic life form, she is now technically illegal in her existence and she cannot trust anyone. She doesn't have anyone, and she can't trust anyone, and she's at the mercy of these strangers. So she's feeling excessively vulnerable, and so when Picard says something kind of snide to her, she ends up pretty much shoulder checking him and knocks him sideways as she storms off. So we're also going to talk about Riker's conversation with Picard now. Now, I absolutely love this part. Riker has, historically been a playboy, and he plays the trombone, and that's just a total Riker thing. So I saw a meme the other day that it has Picard playing the pipe that he had from that pretty much extinct group of people where he experienced that entire life on that planet with them, like with a partner and kids and stuff, and turned into an old man only to find out it was pretty much in his head, but he still had the pipe that he learned how to play as an instrument. And that works really well with his character because he's really into archaeology, and it's a really soft flute-like melodic sound that the instrument he plays makes. And then you have Riker with his trombone, and you have Q playing the trumpet in that one episode as well, which is very Q. It's loud, it's grating sometimes, and it definitely makes a statement. So in this way, I really enjoyed seeing how Riker has already clocked Picard as soon as he got here. He's still very much our Riker. He's just more experienced now. So he already recognized that Soji was an android because of the head tilt that she made. And I thought the head tilt was a little overpronounced. I mean, Soji, we haven't seen her really do that before, and it was a lot more robotic of a movement than we are used to from her. And we didn't really see that with Daj, so I felt like that one was a little bit overdone in a way. But you know what? This is such a great episode. I'm going to give it a pass, you guys. But she does the head tilt at one point, and Riker tells Picard while he's preparing the pizzas outside that he would recognize that head tilt anywhere. So he's like, this has something to do with data. And because there's Romulans involved, and she's a synth and everything, I'm going to say it's the Tal Shiar that you are involved with. You maybe raise the shields and everything around the house. And so this is really bad news bears is what's going on. You're in deep crap right now, and it's not you on the run per se, it's her. So he has figured out a bunch of this stuff, and he's like, you're not going to be able to command this girl the way that you did the crews of starships. She's not Starfleet. She's just a kid, pretty much. She was a scientist. I don't want to understate that. Soji is very intelligent. She's very young, but she's also very intelligent and was probably doctorate level working on this artifact. So she probably would have had her doctorate at this point in order to get this really dope job. And so that means she sped through a lot of stuff. Again, she's a synth, and so technically she was programmed for this by Bruce Maddox, her quote-unquote father, but I digress. But we see that he is also a lot freer with his speech with Picard at this point, and refers to Picard thinking that he's going to be able to handle this girl like she's a crew member as being classic Picard arrogance. And I loved that part and the look on Picard's face, because in the last, I don't know how long it took them to get to the artifact, but in the last however long since he initially requested from the Admiral to have a ship and everything to go and take care of this and find Soji, he has been called out on his arrogance on multiple occasions. This time it is from his friend and former second in command, his number one. And he's also been called out about his sheer effing hubris. So this is pretty funny at this point for me. And it's just like, dang, man, everyone is just being real straightforward with you. You left the limelight and everything for like 14 years, and you aren't an admiral anymore. I mean, you're technically a retired admiral, but you are going to have these different conversations with folks. Because at this point, Riker is also attained the rank of admiral, I do believe. And I'm not sure what grade admiral he is, so what rank he is compared to Picard's admiral, or the admiral who is the head of Starfleet and told Picard that he was being arrogant in asking for all this stuff. But it's really interesting to see these interactions. And I love that he just says it bluntly. He's not even concerned that Picard is going to get upset because they're friends. And when you have a really close friend like that, you can say things like, hey, you're being problematic, here's why, and still be friends. Just like we see with Deanna calling him out and telling him, hey, you're being an absolute jerk and you need to do better. I know you can do better. Be better. Be the man that you truly are, and you'll actually help out this girl. So I really enjoyed seeing all of that come together. It's not just Rafi that's not taking his crap, or someone who is in power like the Admiral, but it's also Deanna and Riker and everyone. They're all like, I'm not taking your crap. Even Kestra is not afraid to point a bow and arrow at him. And he is just so human in that way. It's very humanizing for Picard. Elnor is mad at him. It's just a ton of people are mad at Picard. It's not just Soji. So he's just making everyone around him mad, and no one's in a position at this point to have to stuff down how upset they are or anything. They're just outright calling him on it. And I really love that humanizing of this classic stoic character who has historically commanded so much respect. And so he's still commanding respect. If his friends did not respect him, then I don't think that they would call him out on him being able to do better and telling him to do better. It's because they love and respect him that they are even bothering right now. Now, this episode is also really well done. I love the visuals of it. And really, Riker and Troy are kind of living my dream house area, where they are going out and they're just hunting their food and they're growing their food and are living in a cabin in the woods, but they still have technology if/when they may need it, with those really cool shields and stuff. It seems very chill and really nice, despite the fact that they moved there in order to deal with Thad being sick and everything. So they're living a cautious but peaceful existence, and it's really nice to see something nice for them at this point. They've been through a lot, even barring what we learned happened with Thad. They've been through a lot over the years. Remember that time that Troy got turned into like a salamander or something? So everyone on the ship devolved, and Troy, because she was Betazoid, devolved into like this lizard-like creature and everything, some type of herptile. And a lot of folks degraded in different ways. I think Barkley ended up being like a spider or something. It was super weird, but it was really interesting, all the things they've been through over the years, and they deserve something nice at this point. So I loved seeing them older and clearly very much still in love with each other and very happy with Kestra, even if they still have the lingering sadness from losing Thad. I also really like seeing that sadness as a new facet of these characters that we're used to. Riker's always been carefree and fun-loving for the most part, and he can be very serious when he needs to be, but Riker would rather not be. And you can see that he still has that easy smile, but he has his demons. I really enjoy getting to see him having equal footing with Picard, and I also recently learned that Jonathan Frakes has his master's degree from Harvard. He went to Penn State University at first and was a psychology major, but then he worked as an usher at a local theater during the summer and saw how much fun the actors had and went back and changed his major, finished his time at Penn State in 1974, and then got his master's at Harvard in Boston in 1976. So, very impressed. I've always been impressed with Frakes, but I'm just like, whoa, I didn't even know that you also went to school for that. Also, while he was at Penn State, you guys, he went and played the trombone. So he says that whenever you see Riker playing the trombone poorly, that is him, and whenever you see him playing well, that is someone that they hired to play the trombone for Riker. So I thought that was very funny. He's also been in 5 different series with Marina Sirtis. Like, they've actually filmed the episodes together. And of course, we already know about Star Trek Next Generation, Picard, and Enterprise. But in addition to that, they also did episodes of Gargoyles and Gargoyles the Goliath Chronicles together. Which, I don't know if you guys were big Gargoyles fans as kids, but I was, and I was stoked to see that. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about the aftermath of Soji and Picard's very heated conversation.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about some facts about Jonathan Frakes, in addition to talking about what's going on with our character interactions, specifically those between Picard and Riker, now that they are on more equal footing. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with Soji and Picard, now that Deanna has given him some tough love, and Riker has gone ahead and let him know, hey, you don't have to hide this information to try to protect us. We already figured it out. I mean, come on. I also really love that he still takes his friends' comments to heart. So Picard is not a man who is easily swayed, but when he respects your opinion, he is going to at least consider it. And so he does indeed consider what Deanna has told him and how he had that coming, and that the attempt that he was making, or the way that he was attempting rather, to help Soji was not what she needed. And she's saying, this is not the approach you need to take. There is a better way. And it's not about how you're comfortable doing this. It's about what she needs. I have also found myself in that position in the last year or so, in realizing that the way I normally intuitively go to help people with their problems is not always truly helpful. Or rather, it's not that it's not helpful, but it's not helpful in the way that they need in the moment. So anytime someone comes to me with a problem, my gut reaction is to fix it, to work on a solution. But sometimes people just need the space to get used to the idea of whatever new terrible thing is happening. And sometimes that means they need to talk about it, to process it, and go from there. Now, I won't coddle people. I will sit there and listen to them. But I'm not someone who will coddle someone. And so if you're going too far overboard with the display, then I will go ahead and be like, hey, you know, your feelings are totally valid, but that particular thing you just said is not true, and it's not helpful. It may, in fact, be more hurtful, and you're setting yourself on this positive feedback cycle of negative emotions. So let's process this in a healthy way, and I will work together with the person to do that. But now, I have also found that the best way for me to help people is to ask them outright what they need. Does that make me feel a little bit like Data sometimes? Yes. I very much feel like an android for quite a bit of the time. But people end up thanking me for it. So by asking people how you can best help them with these things, do you need a sounding board, or do you just want me to hold you while you cry, or do you want me to help you try to find a solution for it? What it's really saying is, how best can I love you? How best can I display that love for you? And we see that Deanna and Riker know Picard well enough to know what he needs and how to speak to him. And if it wasn't for my friends who are very close to me and whom over the years have gotten to know me really well and me take their opinions to heart, I would not have come to that realization. Around this time last year, one of my friends told me that the way that I was trying to help her wasn't helpful. And she's like, dude, I just need to get this off my chest. Stop trying to fix everything. I'm not ready to fix it. I'll be ready to fix it later. And you always do this. And so my ex-boyfriend, who is one of my very best friends, also seconded that because we were roommates. And so she was here when he was also here. And he was like, yeah, you do that. And it is bothersome. And I'm like, oh, well, dang, I didn't realize that bothered multiple people. So there's my sample size and letting me know that is something that is a problem. And I value both of these people's opinions. So I'm really going to take this to heart and work on my approach. And it's really helped me to become a kinder, gentler Alex and to help more people. You can reach more people by broadening your toolkit. I'm still very much the crisis friend, and a lot of friends will still come to me when they need an emergency solution and they don't know what to do. And that is truly where I thrive. But growth never really comes from a place of comfort. And while it has been a bit uncomfortable for me in being more vulnerable and also helping my friends in these different ways, it has broadened my toolkit and it's resulted in a lot of growth. And it was very nice for me to see that similar type of thing happening with Picard on the show. I have historically been more prickly like Picard, but also just like Picard. As I am aging, it is also bringing me more kindness and gentleness from my experiences rather than just hardening me and helping me to make quick decisions. So I'm seeing that you can do both. And I very much appreciate Picard's journey in this season, and particularly in this episode, as we see him growing from a place of discomfort. Being given what for by your friends is never a fun thing, but it is necessary, and it's important to receive it with an open mind and love instead of with defensiveness. And because Picard responds to Deanna by listening to her, even if he's taken aback by how upset she is with him and how candid she is about it, he very much has the sense of, she is right. And so I need to keep that in mind and make a change. I think it's absolutely beautiful how these characters have changed and grown together, and they're still the characters that we loved, but now it just makes me love them more to see where their journeys have taken them at this point. And at this point, we see that Riker's still Riker, but he's going to be more solid about what he says to Picard when it comes to standing his ground and calling him out, and so is Deanna. He's able to make the right choices he needs to make, though. And now that Deanna and Riker both know what's going on with Soji, he goes ahead and they say that they're going to help him in whatever way. But as I mentioned earlier, Deanna has changed a bit from before. And she outright tells Picard that. She's like, I'm not as brave as I used to be, because she lost her son. and she would love nothing more than to help Picard, except for the fact that she could not bear to lose Kestra if it came down to it. So Picard is definitely not asking her, and Deanna is being a very good friend in providing her boundaries to him at that point. And he doesn't ask her to, but she's like, I love you and everything, and I want to help you, but I could not bear if something happened to my daughter at this point. And he very much respects that and loves her for creating that boundary, and he totally understands. And I think it's a really good display of healthy boundary setting and going, if these people love us, if we set these boundaries, it's not going to be a problem. They are still going to love us. They're just not going to be participating in this particular thing that we have going on. It's really beautiful. It's very human. And I love this display of true depth of understanding and friendship that they have together. And also vulnerability. We also see at this point that Soji comes to the dinner table. And when Soji comes to the dinner table, they give her some pizza and everything. And they say that guests get 2 pieces. So even though Riker was upset with her earlier, he's showing her that he's not going to hold it against her. You can get mad at your friends and still love them, still care about them, and still operate like normal. Just because you have a negative interaction with someone does not mean that the entire relationship is going to be negative, which is the inverse of what she learned with Narek, that just because she had all these positive interactions with him did not mean that overall their relationship was going to be in any way positive. And I really enjoyed seeing how they flipped that on its head within just these 2 episodes. It was narratively very beautiful, and it's showing that essentially Picard and Riker and them are a mirror image of what Narek and them were to her. And I do mean mirror image as being, the inverse. It's flipped as to what is happening. So she's seeing that maybe she can trust other people, even if she is still very reluctant. These people seem to be very good, and she can also recognize that through they're essentially their ambassador to her, which is Kestra. And Kestra isn't actively acting as an ambassador. She's just being herself, but she is the child of these 2 wise, brave, bold, caring people. And seeing that this kid is raised with them out in the middle of nowhere and everything, and is sharing these intimate parts of herself with Soji, like teaching her the Vivine language and everything. It's really beautiful and indicative to her that perhaps she really can trust these people as she likes and trusts Kestra. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up where all the characters are at the end of this episode. Stay tuned.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about where Picard and Soji end up in working together with Will and Deanna at the end of this episode. Now, Will and Deanna know about the quest, and they're discussing it over bunny corn pizza at the dinner table, and ultimately they help Picard win Soji over. Soji's able to read facial cues, which is something we learn right now in this episode, and says that she knows that at least Picard doesn't think that he's lying to her. But she also is still very suspicious and is very careful about her phrasing in that. And so she's explicitly saying, I know that you don't think that you're lying to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't. And seeing that at this point, Soji can't even trust her own memories and a lot of her own thoughts and her own judgment regarding Narek and her age and all of her experiences in the past. The only thing that is true for her is that she did have a sister named Daj, but Daj was also synthetic, and neither of them knew that. So she can't even trust herself, and her judgment is already suspect in her opinion, so it's really hard for her to trust what other people might think. It's very surreal for Soji, and, you know, she's essentially been gaslighted by Narek and by her father, Bruce Maddox, in a way. It's not entirely gaslighting because Bruce programmed her, because she's a synth, but it is gaslighting after the fact to then not tell her that she was a synth and to send her out there into the world and to end up with her having these absent memories that some of them are starting to come back at this point too. So now Soji may not have been gaslighted by Narek in his love for her, but she will not be able to believe that his interest in her was ever true, except for perhaps in the next season. Maybe we will find that he really did give her his true name, and if his sister finds out about that, that's going to be a big deal. I would imagine that his sister would know his true name since they were kids together and stuff, and it's part of Romulan culture to have those 3 names. So we're going to see. I'm really kind of hoping that Soji throws that out at some point, and his sister hears it and is like very shocked, and it's super dramatic. That's what I'm waiting for, you guys. As soon as he told her that, I'm like, yes, this has so much potential for drama and to go sideways in the future, because Soji's going to be shocked that he gave her his real name, his real true name, because of all of the other subversive stuff he's done, and that's going to make her question how he feels about her again. And it's also really going to upset his sister, and things are going to go super sideways, which is very exciting. It's like a drama bomb, but one that's on a timer or with a remote detonator. So we're going to see how that plays out, hopefully. Granted, it's Star Trek, you guys. They don't do anything by accident. He could have given her any name, but I bet he gave her his actual true name because he figured he does love her, but also he's going to have to kill her anyway, so she's not going to be able to tell anybody, but boom, she didn't die. So I'm very excited to see when that other shoe drops. I think maybe next season, but maybe they'll take it out longer than that. I think next season, though. I don't know what you guys think, but I would love to hear your theories on Twitter. So, right now, Soji is remembering a couple of things about her planet, and she goes ahead and explains to Picard and the Troy Rikers, exactly what she saw that she told Narek. And Kestra's sitting at the table, and she's like, yeah, we should ask that crazy old man who flies ships all the time on the other side of town or whatever. And they're like, that man is crazy. And it's essentially like a Ben Kenobi type scene in which Uncle Owen is going, oh yeah, you know, that old hermit's crazy. And then he ends up really being able to save them all, more or less. And Kestra is like, no, he's cool. He's really been all over. And so she's like texting at the dinner table under the table. And they're like, well, we don't know where you would find specifically that type of planet. How are we going to find that? And she's like, oh yeah, my crazy old man friend, I texted him just a minute ago, and he told me that it is this planet in this system. So that is what we're looking for. And they're just kind of shocked about it, but they're like, sweet. So they go ahead and are planning to charter a ship to take them there if the La Sirena does not show up. However, they are able to get into contact with the La Sirena. And when we get to see where everyone is on board that ship, it is a lot of guilt. There's a lot of guilt going on, especially for Agnes. She is more or less having a meltdown, and we are finding that Commodore O is who made her essentially go join the La Sirena and to assist Picard on his quest. And, also murder Bruce Maddox. So why did that happen, though? Turns out Commodore O did a mind meld with her and showed her what would happen if synthetic life were allowed to exist. And it's a bunch of really indiscernible flashes of death and destruction, but it's very clearly upsetting for Agnes and has totally convinced her that she has to do this very terrible thing, because whatever she is shown is so horrible that she's willing to do whatever it takes. And now we know what she actually does, and she kills Maddox and also gave Narek a way to trace the La Sirena as it goes through space. So they've been trying to lose Narek, not knowing it was specifically Narek through the time, but Agnes is really coming to terms with the choices that she has made and that she's been continuing to make, and it's a real reckoning for her. And at this point, she is getting really upset, and Rafi's like, oh, she's probably just really sad about Bruce still. And Rafi does really good with the mothering, and Rafi is a mother without a child right now, more or less, because her son has rejected her. So for her, this is something that's good and healthy for her to do, to try to take care of Agnes. Rafi offers her drugs, but Agnes says that she just wants chocolate cake. And so Agnes eats the cake and throws it up. You can tell that she's clearly very upset. And then she ends up injecting herself with noranium hydride, and that puts her into a coma. But it also kills the tracker that she has in her in order to let them go freely and shake Narek. And it's right about that point where Rios is thinking of accusing Rafi of being the problem. But just before he says that, the EMH is like, hey, your girl's down, she's in a coma, and something's going sideways. We also have Elnor still back on the artifact, fighting the fight against Narissa, Narek's sister. And he does what he can, and does actually a really good job with fighting her, even though, again, he's brought swords to a disruptor fight. But unfortunately, we lose Hugh in the process. And Hugh tells him that he can activate the artifact's queen cell that they use to help Picard and Soji escape. And he can do that with the help of another XB. I was so bummed to lose Hugh so early on, but they did a very good job in getting me to really feel his death and that loss at this point. It's only 7 episodes in, you guys, and it was just very gutting. And it's also very hard for Elnor because he is there on the ship by himself. Sure, he can go ahead and get the help of another XB, but Elnor doesn't know anyone here. He followed Picard on board, and now he is by himself in the belly of the beast. And by that, I don't mean the Borg, actually. I mean that in reference to the Romulans, because the Zhat Vash are there, and they are the sworn enemies of the Qowat Milat. Although Elnor can technically not be one in name, it is really in name only that he is not Qowat Milat. And so Narissa recognizes that when she sees him, and she's very excited by this confrontation and says that she wants to fight him the way that Qowat Milat and Zhat Vash are meant to fight each other. It's a really great choreographed fight scene, and he gets to fight Narissa specifically too. So I've been waiting for that, and it was dope. But Elnor doesn't really make it far enough to get to the Queen Cell, but we have a surprise character pop up to save him, essentially at the last minute. And it's a very interesting mismatch. We have a lot of mothers without children at this point. We have Rafi. We also have 7 of 9 because she lost Icheb early on. And we have Deanna right now, although Deanna does have another child. And we see how these characters all deal with this differently. Rafi has turned to alcoholism and drugs. Troy has become less brave, but more firm in her boundaries and more capable of tough love at this point. And we also have 7 of 9 just being like, hey, I've got nothing left to lose at this point. YOLO. And going from there. So I think it's very interesting how these women are all dealing differently with their loss. And I love that we're getting this group of women who are separate. They're not all in the same place, but they have these shared similar histories. And I think that makes their Venn diagrams even richer, especially since they deal with it in different ways. And they've not lost their children necessarily in the same ways, but we end up with a bunch of mothers who lost their children and also children without parents like Elnor and Soji. It's really interesting to me, and I cannot wait to see where they go with it. So right now, that is where Elnor is on the artifact with probably 7. And aside from that, Picard and Soji are ready to leave because the La Sirena has made it to Nepenthe, and you get to see a group hug and see Will and Deanna and Kestra say goodbye. And Kestra hugs Soji. We don't see her hug Picard, but we do see her hug Soji. And it's nice to see that she's made some sort of connection with another person in that way, since she's still aching from losing her brother. And she's able to share with Soji the Vivine language, because as a synth, Soji picked it up in like a minute. So this is someone that she can kind of share those memories with, and who is very much like her brother and not having a home world. And she's very excited for Soji to go on this journey and find her home. So we know that this may be the last time that Picard sees them, but he calls for 2 to beam up, and he and Soji are beamed aboard the La Sirena. So that is the end of the episode. I really love how this played out. I also really enjoyed that Riker looks absolutely ginormous next to Picard at this point. I'm loving Riker's beard. Riker's beard is its own character all on its own. We all know that already. And I also really enjoy that they have really paid attention to how they name these characters too. So Thad's name is actually the name of one of Riker's American Civil War era ancestors, who was a Union soldier that they referenced in an episode of Voyager. This show digs deep, you guys. And Kestra is the name of Deanna's older sister, who drowned when Deanna was too young to remember her. Her mom, Lwaxana Troi, suppressed that memory only for it to come back later in life because she was just way too crushed. And so in that way, Nepenthe is also representing the fact that if you forget the past, it doesn't make it go away. That is as true for Soji and for Picard and Rafi and Rios as it is for Riker and Troy and Kestra. This episode is beautifully orchestrated. There are so many layers to it, you guys, especially if you were fans of Voyager and The Next Generation. I really love this episode, and the best part of it for me is when Picard and Riker kind of take a walk out to a pond or a lake nearby, and they're sitting on a bench together. And Riker has his arm over the back of the area where Picard is sitting. And it's just kind of Picard thanking him for being there for him and being his friend, more or less. And it shows us how he's softened in his old age enough to admit some of these things that he's likely always felt to a certain degree, but has stuffed down because of stoicism. And Riker's always been out there, but as a dad too, he has that dadly thing going on in which he's also there to comfort and reassure his friend, even if his friend used to be his commanding officer and is a lot older than him. It was a beautiful moment of wholesome masculinity. You guys know I love those, and I would be remiss if I did not point it out. It was also just a really great moment between two of my favorite characters in fiction. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.